I am your host, Nicole Will, and we're so happy you're here as we navigate the world with your aging loved one. We are here to come alongside older adults, family members, and the senior living community as we explore the world of aging and elder care with helpful resources, informative interviews, and approachable conversation. We get to do this together, so join us on our journey, and this is the Will Gather podcast. SendOff is giving us permission to embrace a new approach at how we look at celebrating the end of life. My guest today is Kelly Roberts. He is the founder of SendOff Funerals Reimagined. This is a new and unique memorial brand curating highly personalized events within hospitality venues throughout the Twin Cities and beyond. Kelly has over 25 years of experience in retail, hospitality, and funeral home ownership. He was inspired to change the narrative in the funeral home space. They are challenging traditions, putting our legacy in action, and unveiling the new narratives of how we can empower families in their funeral choices. In our conversation today, we are talking about how the funeral industry has traditionally approached those end-of-life ceremonies, in what ways maybe we've been resistant to change and innovation, and why it's important we challenge these old ways of thinking. What role does pre-planning play in the journey of the family and our loved ones, and how it contributes to a more meaningful and intentional end-of-life experience? How do we pull in those send-off elements, as Kelly talks about, to bring our loved one's presence in the room? How can families celebrate and honor the life of their loved one in unique and personalized ways? And how having these conversations can bring about a mindset that is death positive, and how SendOff can support families after the death of a loved one, and how these services contribute to the healing process, how we can empower families to think differently about end of life and give them permission to explore alternative approaches. We also look at how the funeral industry can collaborate with other sectors such as senior living, hospice, estate planning to provide a more holistic approach and support. And even in our busy lives and schedules, why it's important that we attend the celebrations and funerals for our loved ones, and what advice Kelly has for us when maybe we don't always know what to say or do. Here is my interview with Kelly Roberts. Hi, Kelly. I'm looking forward to this. We've been introduced. I've had the privilege of following along, seeing what you're up to here in the Twin Cities, and I know that it's even a bigger conversation than that as you reach many more people with your message of reinventing how we approach end of life and services and everything that we offer. So thank you so much for joining me today.
Nicole, thanks so much for having me on. It's my pleasure.
We got to meet in person. What was it, like a month ago or so, which was really fun?
It was, yeah, it was down at Kathy Wurzer and Carla Holt event down in Stillwater. So that was a great event and a lot of good information. And yeah, it's good meeting you down there.
It was really fun. And you have kind of a childhood connection with Carla, right? You guys grew
Yeah,
up together.
I like to, my claim to fame in life is that Carla Holt was my first girlfriend.
I love it.
All the way back in fifth grade, if you want to call it boyfriend, girlfriend back then.
Right.
Yeah, so Carla's been a lifelong friend, graduated high school with Carla and have stayed connected over the years with her, and just a great gal.
Yeah, she has a heart of gold. It just comes out in everything that she was doing. And she has so many goodbyes, which supports dementia,
Right.
Alzheimer's families. And we got to see her speak and talk about caregiving. And you can just see that in how she shares and her compassion and all of that. So, yeah, I bet she was
Yeah,
like that way back then.
yeah, she we had her up here in Forest Lake to speak as well back about a year ago. And so she has a very impactful message, and she has a passion for just supporting people that are going down the same journey that she did with her dad. And so she's just doing really impactful work, and kudos to her.
Yeah, it was fun to see. Really fun to see. I want you to tell us more about you and your background and how you decided to reinvent the funeral industry. Is that the term that we want to use, or end of life
Yeah,
services?
we're kind of reimagine the funeral, I guess. And so kind of going way back, I guess, and I'll make this as short as possible. So we grew up here in Forest Lake, Minnesota, and my grandparents way back in the day started a flower shop back in 1930, and that evolved into kind of more of the garden center type model as well. And my mom and dad took that over from my grandparents. And then fast forward all the way, and we grew up in the business too. I've got two brothers as well, Nicole, and it was a family affair for sure. And so my brothers and I bought the business from my mom and dad in the year 2000. And I always had an interest in funeral service. And I think some of that came about just from delivering flowers to area funeral homes. And so always just kind of intrigued me more than anything. And so I have a degree in business, never did go back to get my mortuary science degree, but I probably should have, but never did. And about 2003, we got really serious about looking at bringing another funeral home to the Forest Lake area. And so we did, and we had greenhouses on the land where the funeral home sits now. And my brothers and I didn't want to be farmers. And so we got rid of the greenhouses and then built the funeral home on the back side of the property here in Forest Lake, and the property that my grandparents bought back in 1930. So we opened that up in 2005, and it was just really rewarding to help our community and helping them say goodbye to their loved ones. And so that really kind of fueled us in a number of different ways. It just kind of filled our cups, really impactful work that we were doing. And so kind of along the way, we were just looking at kind of different industries and different consumer trends, and just hearing feedback from a lot of peers and others that anytime that line of work would come up, oftentimes they would say, well, I don't want to have a funeral, Kelly, I want to have a party. And so that always kind of stuck in the back of my mind over time. And back about 10 years ago, I thought about kind of doing what we're doing now. We're basically taking the funeral experience out of the churches and the funeral home settings and going out to hospitality venues and having the events within. And so we were kind of down that path for a little bit. And then I decided to just put that on the back burner for a number of reasons, and decided to focus on what we were doing here in Forest Lake, and kind of knowing that perhaps at some point we'd bring that to the forefront and try and get that established. And so right before the pandemic, we were kind of seeing a little bit of a trend here too, Nicole, where a lot of the families were not really having any services at all or any event to honor their loved ones, where it would just be a cremation and they would come in and pick up the urn and then be on their way and either do something on their own or not do anything at all. And we feel that it's really important for families to at least do something to honor their loved ones. That can be very significant for a number of reasons. And so with that kind of trend that we were seeing, we thought that it would be a good time to bring up the idea I had 10 years ago to the forefront. And we started kind of going down that path again, Nicole, and then the pandemic hit, put that on hold for obvious reasons during that time. And then back about 2021, really got serious about starting this new brand, an extension of our brand here in Forest Lake. And we got together with some marketing people and came up with the brand name, and that's SendOff with the tagline Funerals Reimagined. And so we feel that we really kind of hit a home run with that name. I think it's going to resonate with a lot of people. It already has. And so we, again, just started putting everything in line and kind of, putting the puzzle together piece by piece. And we launched in November of 2022. And so really the essence of the brand is to curate highly personalized experiences outside of the churches and funeral home settings. So we partnered with hospitality venues throughout the Twin Cities, and these venues will speak to a lot of people. So they can be breweries, wineries, golf courses, favorite restaurants, bars, and outdoor spaces, and on lakes and rivers, and in every space in between. And so we launched back in November. And now also, I just want to make it clear too, that if someone wanted to have a traditional component to their SendOff we can definitely be that provider as well. And so we've already had a couple of those where we had a traditional component at their church, and then we went to a different venue to continue on their send off in unique ways. And so it's not all about this, this party. It can be a party, but there can be ritual, there can be ceremony, there can be tradition built into the overall send off.
The personalization, and I think that's what it's about, is how do we honor the person and their wishes and what they loved and bring that out to the forefront. So however that looks for them, and you're able to really make that happen. How would you say has the funeral industry traditionally approached those end of life ceremonies and services? And what are some of the limitations with that? What are you seeing, and what have you seen?
You hit the key word being traditional and tradition. And looking back over time, and there was almost always, someone would pass away, and it would be, okay, what are the options here? And the options would be, well, let's have a visitation the night before at the funeral home, and then there would almost always a service at the church the following day. I mean, that was 90% of what most funeral homes, how they operated. There's nothing wrong with that. That was a model that's been there for generations and for many, many years. And that was just what most people did. And so kind of looking at what the wedding industry has done over time, how that's continued to evolve over especially the last 20 years. And the funeral industry has really just been kind of stuck in its ways. And so especially when someone were to pass away suddenly, and families really only know what they know. And so they feel they have to call the same funeral home that they've always used and go back to the same church that they've always had their family funerals at. And at the end of that experience, oftentimes people will reflect back and say there has to be something better out there than what we just experienced. And so again, I'm nothing against the traditional funeral, whatsoever. That has worked for a lot of years, and people find value in that. But there are a lot of other options out there to honor a loved one rather than the traditional way.
I think we're yearning for the expression of our individuality and who we are. And we see that. You mentioned the wedding industry. I mean, I remember I got married, 20 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And it was you followed the tradition. You
Right.
did not step outside the lines. Then there was the evolution of Pinterest, and we had access to creative ideas and pictures, and not staged up. I remember wedding pictures. It was like you had the same pose as everybody else in
Yeah.
front of the church, outside by the
Right.
flowers or whatever it was. And
Exactly.
now just look at the creativity. And I think people are realizing, actually, we can do what we would like to do, and the permission to be able to do that. Do you feel like there's been resistance to change within the funeral industry and innovation, the challenging kind of those old ways of thinking about it?
Yeah, I think that there has been some of that, but at the same time too, these funeral homes over time, they're often really busy.
Mm-hmm.
And so they haven't had really the resources to make any change. And I think that a lot of them they see kind of, all of these different ways to honor a loved one. And there's chatter in the industry about doing different things. And that needle has moved
Mm-hmm.
somewhat.
Mm-hmm.
But for example, if they were to go to a convention and they hear of all these really cool and unique ideas that is out there in the industry, and they go back to their funeral home and they're just really busy.
Yeah.
And so they don't have the bandwidth to make any real changes. Now, some of that has taken place, and there has been some change over time. We feel with SendOff that we can even move that needle even further. And so that's what we're trying to do.
That's such a good point. You're right. When we go to conferences or we hear ideas, we get energized by it. And then
Right.
when you come back to real life and schedules and time crunch,
Yeah.
we don't always have the capacity. And planning unique events for people it takes time and energy. And so it's how do you have the resource and the time to be able to do that unless you're really dedicated towards that mission.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And early on here in our send-off journey, we're working with a number of families right now. And these events they're taking a lot of time and energy for us to plan along with the family. And so far more than obviously the traditional funeral for obvious reasons. And so it does take a lot of time and energy because these families want something really remarkable and very special. And so there's a lot of thought put into it on their ends, much like planning a wedding, to kind of go back to that analogy.
So with that, do you have recommendations in terms of for families or for anyone as we're thinking about the future, what role does pre-planning play? Is that important to consider? Like, and how far in advance do we think of these things or put them on our radar? How does that come to be to create more of that meaningful experience?
Yeah, and absolutely. I mean, pre-planning we're trying to educate and even empower estate planning attorneys to recognize that pre-planning for end-of-life services is an important part of the overall estate plan. And so for them to educate their clients on the importance of doing so. And so we encourage pre-planning. The industry encourages pre-planning, and basically it's peace of mind, not only for that individual, for that couple that are pre-planning, but peace of mind for their kids as well, kind of knowing that all of those important details are taken care of. And pre-planning can be as simple as like having a conversation with your kids, with your loved ones, and just kind of jotting down some notes and just framing everything up for them, just so they have somewhat of an idea. Or families come in and they really dot the I's and cross the T's, Nicole, where they're picking out their songs, they're picking out scripture readings, they're picking out what we would call send-off elements, where if they wanted to have a mechanical bull at their send-off or sing karaoke or fireworks or all of those elements to bring their presence within those spaces. And so there's a lot of families that will pre-plan it in certain, not so much categories, but just like phases, I guess.
Yeah.
Right. But we just really encourage at least have the conversation with your kids, your loved ones. And we're finding that a lot of the younger generations are more deaf positive too about having these conversations. And an example that I have with my own parents, my dad is 83 years old and my mom is 77. And we've struggled having the conversation as far as what they would want. And we're in the business too. And so I brought it up a couple of times and they kind of shut down, to be honest, Nicole.
Oh, I'm sure they're like, it's uncomfortable. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it can be uncomfortable. We're trying to make it comfortable. And there's a lot of people in the end of life space that we've kind of partnered with, much like what you're doing, Nicole, as well, is just to make it more comfortable, make it a conversation that everyone should have, of course, at some time.
I'm so glad you're doing that. Do you find, our families coming up with some of those ideas and those unique suggestions, or is that something that you really partner with them on and give them the idea of possibility? I think sometimes when things have always been done the way they've always been done, we don't always know what our options are or what's even available to us. What are you seeing and when you're
in our message here with SendOff is that anything is possible within reason. And so there are some families that, in fact, I met with someone here about a week ago and on a pre-planning situation, and she wanted to have a high tea. And when her and I spoke on the phone, I didn't really know exactly what a high tea was, but I did some research and found out in a short amount of time on what that all looked like. And so in that case, she had an idea as far as kind of what she wanted to have for her send-off. One of the most important things that we can do with families when we meet with them, either on a pre-need situation or when someone's passed away, is we take the first 10 to 15 minutes and just talk about that individual. We bring their presence in that room for the first, again, 15 to 20 minutes. And it's their time to share really what made their loved one tick. And so with that, the whole time we're taking notes. and then we can come up with just really good ideas and inspirations on how we can help celebrate their loved one's life, and also empower them at the same time, and give them permission to think outside of the box, pun intended.
Right.
And so that's kind of fun, actually, Nicole. And there's a lot of joy in that as well. When families are sitting around that table and they're all of a sudden they're telling stories, and that discovery time can even be 45 minutes long.
Wow.
Before we even start our formal process with them. And so that can be healing for them too, to just share some of those stories and memories. And so then it's our job to just sit down and just come up and brainstorm with different ideas on what can be done. Yeah. So that's the process.
Thank you for holding space for those families. That is, when we go through that loss, there's nothing better than when someone takes the time to sit and listen to us share about the person that we love the most. So that's huge.
These arrangement conferences, can typically take up to, 2 hours. And we feel that that's the first 15 minutes to 30 minutes is the most important time we have with those families.
You shared the one example about the high tea. What are some other ways that you have found people have been super unique and creative in celebrating those life stories?
Yeah. And so we had a recent send-off event for a lady who loved to dance. And that was her thing. That was her jam. And her nickname was Dancing Deb, of course. And so we had an event for Deb at a venue down in Minneapolis. And we had one of her favorite bands come in to play and perform. And I think the event started at 1:00, and the band was set up by 1:30, and by 1:45, Nicole, the dance floor was packed.
Oh, what a celebration.
And I sat back and just had a smile on my face from ear to ear. And so it was so remarkable to see everyone there just being in, again, her presence in that entire space the entire time, and people just with smiles on their faces as well, and just being able to celebrate her life in the way that she lived her life. She loved to dance.
Yeah.
And so that was one example that was awfully cool. And then we have another one here coming up where this young lady loved fireworks. And so we're going to place some cremated remains into some fireworks and light them off at the end of the send-off about dusk. So about 8:30, 9:00. And so we're looking forward to helping that family with that. Yeah. Another one that we just recently had where this young man loved the song Dancing Queen. In fact, we just put it up on our social here just this morning. And so in this old historic quaint church in southern Minnesota, at the end of the service, the song came on, Dancing Queen, Dominic's favorite song, and everyone was dancing in the aisles. And so that was just kind of another one of those wow moments, and where there's just a lot of joy and all of that from everyone there. And again, just celebrating his life in a very unique way.
Yeah. I'm sure, for all of those examples, you could feel that something special was like really happening.
Absolutely.
Too. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's, for us, that's what, like I talked about before, that's what fuels us, is to bring those experiences to families and their guests. And our goal is for them to walk out of those experiences looking back and saying, that's exactly what we needed to celebrate our loved one and our friend. That's what it's all about.
You touched on this before, but having families think differently about those end of life ceremonies, and how, the funeral industry might be resistant to change or not have the capacity. What would you share with families about changing how they view non-traditional celebrations, to give them permission, I guess, in a way that they can explore that?
Yeah, I mean, it's all kind of getting back to that discovery time with that family, and then just talking about just the different options and the possibilities that are out there. And even here in Forest Lake, we've always been a little bit on the forefront on kind of coming up with different ways to celebrate life. And it's really interesting sometimes that we'll share, well, have you thought about doing this? Or have you thought about doing this? Or this is something that we could do. And the looks on their faces are like, well, we can do that. And our answer is yes, you can, especially here, you can. And so it just, again, the message that we want to bring forth is that really anything is possible within a reason. And so we feel that that's going to resonate with a lot of families and bring joy and bring inspiration and a lot of emotions into that event that will help with the healing process. That's really important.
There's also, when you look at it, your role of education too, and the more conversations that we have around it, and starting that system of support for them, I think that there will be more of that awareness and excitement in a way that we can do things differently and look at what our options are.
Yeah, the education piece is important with all that, and that starts on the pre-planning end of things, Nicole, too. And so we plan on being really proactive in that area. Having an idea that we have is like SendOff Palooza planning parties where we get together with people and they can host them in their homes or coffee shops or even some of our hospitality partners where they get together and it's just an intimate conversation about end of life planning and where we can educate everyone there on the different options and the possibilities and the themes that we put together and on what can be done to celebrate life.
Yeah, like a brainstorm almost. Like, okay, let's dream up what we want that to look
Exactly.
like. Yeah, think
Yeah,
about it.
exactly.
You also offer other types of support and resource, which is so important for families after the loss, right? After the death of our loved one. How do these contribute to that healing process? And what are some of the things that you're doing to support those families?
Yeah. So right now we have, and I think Nicole, have you met Brittany Squillis at all?
I don't know if I have.
Okay.
I'm
So
not sure.
She's a grief therapist
Mm-hmm.
and she's been on our team here in Forest Lake for a number of years now. And so we've got just a really, really great young lady that can help our families in their grief journeys. And so we've got her as a really good resource. We'll also have some grief presentations that she'll be putting on as well. That anyone is welcome. And so we're looking at launching those here yet this year. And so we'll just be for us in a lot of funeral homes for that matter, where when the funeral is over, when the send off is over, we just don't go away. We want to be just proactive with that family and just making sure that they're taken care of and they have the resources available to them. One of the things that is kind of on our agenda too, in our vision, is that we want to not only help them with their grief journey, but also help them with closing out their loved one's life when it comes to dotting the I's, crossing the T's, making sure that just helping them settle the estate. And so we're still kind of in a work in progress as far as what that looks like now, but bringing in partners just to kind of help in all those different areas, because oftentimes especially when someone passes away suddenly, say it's the husband, and 2 weeks after the funeral, his wife is sitting there and with a pile of paperwork on the kitchen table.
Right.
And she's grieving, she's overwhelmed, she's anxious, she's all the above, and she doesn't know where to begin.
Yeah.
And sometimes the kids are out of town or they're too busy to help with, where we would be a resource to help them through that process of just even the simple things, picking up the phone and helping them close out their loved one's cell phone accounts or credit cards, or, helping them with, the probate process and bringing in an attorney to help with that going down that path. There's a lot to it that's very complex. And so we want to be a trusted resource, with those families going down that path as well.
Yeah, that's incredibly helpful because that is so overwhelming. I hear from people all the time about, we've never typically have had to do that before. So where do you begin? What does that
Right.
look like? And you're not necessarily in the right headspace to want to tackle that and need that support. So I could see that being really valuable.
For
Along
sure.
with the collaboration, you just mentioned, collaborating with estate attorneys and things like that. In what other ways do you collaborate? I know you offer education, whether it's partnering with senior living, hospice, that just having that holistic approach in the community. Tell us how you've been doing that.
Well, we've been out just kind of boots on the ground, just in the areas of hospice and senior care communities, people like you, Nicole, as well, and then others that are in the end of life space, helping families, collaborating with death doulas as well. And so we just want to be a resource for families to help in all of those kind of end of life kind of categories, if you will. I mean, it's all a journey, especially when, when a family is going through, perhaps it's a crisis mode. Someone's really sick, or there's a diagnosis that was brought forth, and now they're just trying to kind of scramble to kind of get everything in order. And so we want to be able to help the families kind of navigate that process too, and walk with them down that journey. And so one of the things that we're looking at doing is even helping families kind of carry on the legacy that they have, whether that's through legacy projects, even having a legacy video that can be an option for them to record a lot of their personal stories. And that's something that can be passed down to generations.
Oh yeah.
And be this family heirloom that is just a true treasure. And then also just help them. I think it's called Swedish death cleaning is kind of the term for it. It's just making sure that they dot their I's, cross their T's, getting all their ducks in a row before they pass away. And we would bring in, different resources and collaborate with others to help them through that complex process, because it can be complex. And so we see it all the time where, especially if someone does pass away suddenly and their estate and their other matters are kind of a mess, to be frank. And so that leaves such a burden on survivors, on their loved ones, to help or to try and navigate all of that. There's a lot to it.
Right.
So we want to be proactive in those areas and collaborate with others to help families through that whole process.
It's almost like playing detective at times too.
Right.
I've heard, right, where you're like, where's
Exactly.
this document and how do I find this resource to be able to put all the pieces together?
Exactly. There's a lot to it. There's definitely a lot to it. And oftentimes it takes for a family to go through that crisis and then therefore that death to obviously like, wow, we had no idea. And so to get on the forefront of that and to educate families on the importance of getting all of those things taken care of is significant.
Yeah, it is. Our lives are increasingly busy and we've gotten out of the norm. I think COVID maybe contributed a little bit to that, of just maybe not doing all the things that we used to do. But why is it important that we take the time and the effort to attend those celebrations and those services?
I think that a lot of people have really good intentions. When they hear of someone that they know that have passed away, and they have it in their mind, they have it on their calendar that, okay, I'm going to attend this visitation, I'm going to attend this funeral, I'm going to attend this send-off. And it seems as though that, something will come up and they don't make it. Right. And we want to be just share the message of the importance and the significance of always attending the funeral, always attending the memorial event. And it just brings so much healing to the family to see a lot of love and support around them during that time. I think that a lot of people, again, they have really good intentions, but oftentimes who wants to go to a funeral, right? I understand that. And a lot of people will maybe avoid it because they don't know what to say. They're just really anxious about walking in the doors of the funeral home too. I mean, there's just a lot of factors that go into it. Again, who wants to go to a funeral? Not many people do, of course, for obvious reasons. And so we just want to be really proactive in just getting people to make sure that they attend as much as they can. And of course, things come up, life events come up, and they have really good intentions on doing so. And then things come up and that happens, of course. But I want to share one example, and I'm going to pick on my dad here a little bit again. And so he had a good friend of his that they became really good friends kind of later on in life. And we had a visitation for Dick that he attended the night before. And then we had a massive Christian burial for Dick at his beloved Catholic parish here in town the following day. And I saw my mom in the back of the pew. And after we got the funeral started, I sat down next to my mom. I said, "Where's Dad at?" And something had come up, or it was something. And I was just so like, "Dad, you gotta," I just felt it was really important for him to be there, not to pick on him at all, but it's just kind of one example. It's like he probably could have made it, but something came up and he didn't. And so again, it's easy to just not to attend. But it just, we feel it's really important for a lot of reasons.
Yeah, healing on both sides, I think,
Right.
for everybody.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I think that if you were to talk to someone, and if they attended a funeral and they were to walk out of that experience, they wouldn't say, "Well, I regretted going." Right. So that's just a message that we want to just be proactive with, is that always attend if you can.
That's a good message. You brought up the point of that people always don't know what to say. I think that's accurate, right? We don't want to say the wrong thing. We don't want to make someone feel even more grief, or I don't know, although it's complicated, right? Do you have any advice for people, or things that they can say or that you found to be helpful in those moments?
I do. There's a grief therapist. His name is Doug Manning. Just kind of a pioneer in my opinion, in the end of life space. He also started the funeral celebrant movement here in the United States as well. And so I had the opportunity to go through that celebrant training and Doug a couple different times, and I've read his books as well. And so the piece of advice that we talk about a lot are the 3 H's. So the first H is you hang around, you be present. The second H is you hush. You don't have to say much. And the third H is you hug. So you hang around, you hush, and you hug.
I'm going to remember that.
So we feel that, you don't have to, if you don't know what to say, if there are no words that you have, you don't have to say much at all. It's I'm so sorry, and just leave it at that. I think when people, they overthink that, and then they'll say it the wrong thing at times too.
Yeah, there's been moments when I've even said, "I don't know what to say, but I'm here."
That works too. That's good too. There are no words that I have for you right now. So remember that, the 3 H's, Nicole.
I'm going to remember that. Thank you. This has been great. Where can we learn more? Where can we connect with you? And let's say if someone's not in Minnesota, can they reach out? Can you support them? What does that look like?
Yeah, so reaching out to us via our website. Our web address is sendoff.co. There is a wealth of information about the services that we provide. And then there's a contact form there as well. If anyone wanted to reach out via the contact form, or just simply hello@sendoff.co to ask questions, or go old school and pick up the phone too. Dial that number that's on our website as well. And so our website will be a wealth of information and education on end of life planning, other end of life categories. And so we'll be really proactive and robust on our website and social media as well. Now, as far as anyone from out of state, right now, we only service the Twin Cities metro area and the entire state, I guess, for that matter. But we do have plans to expand our services regional here in Minnesota and then beyond as well. So they can also go to our website and find all the information, of course, that we talked about. And I think the website will, especially over time, it'll continue to evolve, and it'll be just a wealth of information on different inspirations and themes on what a send-off can look like.
Right, what's possible, and we'll look for the growth. I think that'll be really fun to see happen, and it just having the conversation how, as you say, we can reimagine and get us to be thinking about making it personal and the celebration. So thank you for the conversation around that and encouraging us to do that. It's so important.
Nicole, thank you for allowing me to share our story and how we minister to families. That's really what it's all about, is just helping families walk through that path when someone passes away. And so we feel that the SendOff brand will resonate with a lot of families, a lot of consumers. And so we're excited to lead the charge of change within the industry.
Thank you for doing that. Thank you for being here. I appreciate it so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening today. If you enjoyed our episode, please subscribe and give us 5 stars. In all honesty, we'd love to hear from you. Thank you so much for listening to our episode.